Hi, my name is Paulina and today I am going to talk about grading, the main types of grading and the types of grading communication. Firstly, grading is a meaning of human communication that represents language with signs and symbols. For language that utilize a grading system, inscriptions, and complement spoken language by creating a durable version of a speech that can be stored for future reference or transmitted across distance. Grading, in other words, is not a language, but a tool used to make language readable. Within a language system, grading relies on many of the same structures as speech, such as vocabulary, grammar, and semantics, with the added dependency of a system of signs or symbols. The result of the activity of grading is called a test, and the interpreter or activator of this test is called a reader. There are four main types of grading: expository, persuasive, narrative, and descriptive. Expository grading, in which author purpose is to inform or explain the subject to the reader. This type of text can be found in encyclopedia, newspaper, magazine, monograms, among others. One of many experiences with expository tests is when I read a book of the Little Prince Elementary School that my Spanish teacher, Miss Melissa, told us to read it. Here is an example of it. Persuasive grading, that it states the opinion of the grading and attempts to influence the reader. Examples of persuasive text: persuasive advertising text, political persuasive text, public persuasive text, scientific persuasive text. I see persuasive text daily in the street and on social networks. Here's an example of it. Narrative grading, in which the author tells a story. The story could be fact or fiction. There's a different types of narrative text, but the most common are the following: a story, novel, dramatic text, literary essay, etc. An example of mine in narrative text is when I read a good book in my free time. Here is an example of it. Descriptive, a type of expository grading that uses the five senses to paint a picture for the reader. This grading incorporates imaginary and specific details. Types of descriptive text: technical description text, literary description text, etc. I apply descriptive text when I have to describe a place or a person or something, and here's an example of it. Types of grading communication. Letters. The business letter is the basis of at least 90% of all business transactions. It is obvious, then, that the ability to write a good letter is an indispensable and valuable requirement for the student who intends to enter the business world. There are a wide variety of types of letter: letter of request for reference, letter of response to a request for reference, letter of application for employment, letter of request for request, letter of referral or shipment, letter of request for credit, letters of collection. The grading of a letter will depend on the objective with which a letter is to be drawn up. Here is an example of it. Memorandum. The memorandum is a message between two people of the same firm, written on paper that has printed certain words. Guides for reference. A from subject or reference and date. Is used to make attention class. Is mandatory and used internally of organizations. The memorandum can also be defined as a communication used in diplomacy. It is less solemn than the report and the note, usually without signature, in which the facts, reasons, and circumstances that must be taken into account when considering an important or serious matter are reviewed. Here is an example of it. Circulars. It is a type of great communication, the content of which is addressed to several people, command, or levels of an organization, company, or the companies themselves in order to convey information about very varied matters. Here's an example of it. Contract. A contract is the agreement signed between two or more people that are mutually bound to constitute or extinguish a legal bond. Lease contracts or work contracts can be made. It can also be said that a contract is the agreement between the employer and the worker that details the condition under which a worker undertakes to perform a certain job on behalf of the employer and under his direction, in exchange for compensation or salary. Here's an example of it. The regulations. It is the norm elaborated by the employer in accordance with the interests of his company and the current labor legislation, in which the conditions of general complaints on working conditions, human relations, technical measures, and disciplinary sections are established. This serves so that both the employer and the workers know in advance what are the rules that must be followed in the workplace, and the consequence of there are not complaints for each. When appropriate, and in this case before approving the draft regulation, the indicated external advisory department will give a hearing to the Permanent Committee of Workers, providing them with a copy of the draft regulations to pronounce on it, so that workers can be exercise the defense of their acquirement rights, allege possible illegalities, suppression or benefits, etc. Here's an example of it. The manuals. Administrative manuals are documents that serve as means of communication and coordination that allow the organization and registration of information in an organized and systematic manner. The task of preparing administrative manuals is considered as a function of keeping the key personnel informed of the wishes and change in the attitude of the senior management by delineating the organization structure and putting the policies and procedures in writing and permanent form. A correctly graded manual can be a valuable administrative instrument. In essence, administrative manuals represent a means of communicating administrative decisions, and therefore which aims to systematically indicate administrative information. Here's an example of it. Newsletters. Newsletters are defined as periodicals about a certain field of knowledge. Here's an example of it.